This has been an interesting morning for me. I'm not sure why. My mind seems to be working slowly, and I'm more disorganized than ever. I think it must be the heat. I'm not sure, but it's cooler today. May the meditations of my heart and my mind be acceptable to you, loving and gracious God. Allow me to be an instrument of your will. Before as the candles are being lit, I come up here and you see me praying, and usually, many times my prayer, it's very simple. It's one that we all should learn. Help me, help me, help me. And at the end, I say thank you. I was in Boy Scouts 6 decades ago, and this is just to explain a couple differences between what's up there and what was supposed to be up there. And we never clapped when people, I don't know if anybody else was in Boy Scouts, but we had howls. And so we had the firecracker howl and the different howl and so forth. So when I dictate this to my computer, sometimes it hears me howling or saying little words that don't come out right, and I don't read it enough to pick it up. I had a conversation with a minister then when I came, you said, sometimes your sermons don't have an ending. They're confusing, and they are, and I apologize for that. I like to think I do that to have you think more. What did he mean? What does this mean? And yes.
What I was referring to is his written ones. When he comes up here, if you read what is written on the Facebook page, and then you see what he says up there, they're a little different.
Sometimes they're a lot different, like today, because I changed it last night and I changed it again this morning. I do that. It's an evolving process. Life is that way. It evolves, it changes. But when you said that, I thought to myself, when I was in graduate school, I had a certain seat that I sat in, sort of like you in pews. I had a certain seat because I learned that if you sit in a certain place and you do that consistently, your grades get to be higher. It's true. It's true. So I sat in the same seat, not the same seat, but in the same position in every class. And this one class, it was a U-shaped class, and Dr. Hirschberger was giving us this assignment for the end of the semester. And every week somebody would say, Dr. Hirschberger, what do you mean by that? What do you want us to do? And he would explain it again. Next week, Dr. Hirschberger. Next week, Dr. Hirschberger. It's getting towards the end of the semester. And this woman raises her hand. And I would be sitting right there as a U. And I always sat in the left-hand corner of the grouping, because that's a good learning spot. And I was sitting there, and she raises her hand, and she says, Dr. Hirschberger, what do you mean? What do you want from us? And at this point, he was rather frustrated. He pointed at me. He just stopped. You could see it on his face. He just stopped, and he pointed at me, and he said, John, what do I want? I said, until this morning, I didn't figure it out either. I don't know. But I think that's the point. You want me to figure it out. You want me to think about it. So maybe that's my rationalization. I want you to think, Anyhow, but you think anyway. I had a conversation with the minister a number of years ago about railroad tracks. He was into model railroads and stuff like that. And the railroad tracks, they're 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide. 4 feet, 8.5 inches wide. And some people think it goes back to Roman times with the Roman wheels on the chariots. That's not true. Today, there is a standard that goes from 4 feet 8 inches to 4 feet 9.5 inches. Previously, there was a variety about that. some of it was 3 feet 9 inches. When I worked at Bethel Steel in the iron foundry, we had the narrow gauge railroads come in and so forth. But it became a standard, and that way the train could go down the track and not have a problem. Again, when I was doing writing this sermon and reading the readings, I had another conversation I had with the minister was coffee. And to him, he said, it's all the same brew. Well, they do make different flavors. They do make different varieties. And I'm not big into flavor, but different varieties. Okay, and that's kind of nice. And I think there is a difference. And then I remember very clearly a conversation that was going on at the ministerial luncheon. And they were talking about the importance of the German Reformed form of worship. And they were arguing about that. And they said, we must keep the German Reformed Church alive. We must keep the German. And I thought, as I was writing this, wait a minute, we're Lutheran, we're UCC. What is our liturgy? And then I realized it's probably a blending of the two. And hopefully the church becomes a blending of those two denominations, because in the end they have one thing in common, many things in common, but that Christ is our leader. It doesn't matter how we worship. It doesn't matter as much the brew. Okay, it's how we worship our God, and we realize that Christ is our ultimate leader. By the way, worshiping here it's been very pleasant. I mean, it's really interesting, especially on a cooler day. I can wear my jacket. I still haven't gotten to putting my tie on yet. You can ask me sometime why I don't like ties. I like it here when it's cooler. I don't know if you watched the Democratic convention. The first time Biden ran, he dropped out because he was accused of plagiarism. That might happen again, but he dropped out. Today, pretty much anything goes. Anything goes. Today's themes have three or four themes. Hidden lives. The times they are changing. Courage, risk, and the right thing to do. Moses lived a pretty much anonymous life. He hid his Jewish side, and he led a safe life as the advisor to the Pharaoh. Jesus, for most of his life, most of all, hid who he was, his true identity. In these narratives, we see that to answer God's call, transform the lives of those called. Jesus and Moses, and it required a sacrifice on their former identities from both of them, a willingness to give life as it once was, and to give it, allow themselves to be transformed in exchange for this empowered and transformed life based on the will of God. And if you reread Romans, the chapter today, verse 2, it talks about don't be conformed by society, but be transformed. That was a conference theme several years ago for the Penn Southeast Conference. It was also a theme for the Quakers at their yearly meeting a number of years ago as well. At first, Moses was either saved by grace, God's grace, or God's plan. And then God just plucked Moses out of his Egyptian security and secrecy. In the same way, God's call placed Jesus on the path from being a teacher and a preacher to one of notoriety and death. The lives became living sacrifices, total offerings on the altar of God. What does Jesus mean when he says to Peter, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church"? The Greek texts literally say, I only do 2 Greek words here, "Thou art Petros, and upon this Petra I will build my church." Petros, Peter, is a Greek word that means a small stone, one that can be easily moved. So what does Jesus, when he says, you are Peter, on this rock, I will build my church. He's going to build a church on a small stone? Doesn't make sense. The word Petra, on the other hand, according to some researchers, is applied to large mountains. Perhaps what the Lord was really saying is, you are Peter, and any man can move you, but your faith expressed in my deity, is a rock that's immovable as the mountains, and on this I will build my church. It's interesting to note that Simon Peter really wasn't perfect. He had his flaws, yet he became the foundation of the church. Jesus chose to build his church on the cracked foundation of a flawed disciple. It's good news for all of us, because I know I'm pretty flawed. Sometimes I can't even say the words right. Okay, I'm pretty flawed. We all are, and yet this church, God's church, is open to all of us. It's quite a powerful witness of the church that has the potential to open up a powerful movement in an individual and a congregation's life. When Jesus said, I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, what does he mean? The ordinary interpretation is that Peter opened the door of salvation on the day of Pentecost to the Jews and then later to the Gentiles. This is not to say that he was given the power to forgive sins. Rather, he was given the power to proclaim the terms of forgiveness, the good news. This authority was also given to the other apostles. The other thing I noticed, you made this transition. The reading today was from Exodus. The reading from last week was from Genesis. Boy, that's a lot that happened. It appears that the Bible has a selective history written. Jesus ends with the Israelites going to Egypt so they could survive. Joseph is born now you have to remember this is before Christ. Okay, so when I say 1915, it's not 1915, just 3 years after my parents were born. It's 2000 before that. Joseph was born in 1915, sold. Now this is by research, the experts say what this is. He was sold in 1898, and his family was welcomed in 1876. They think Moses was born in 1526. There's 300 years, there's a gap there that's not recorded. What was the name of the Pharaoh? They're not sure about that either. And what was the name of his daughter who saved Moses? No one knows that. It's not mentioned in the Bible, and nobody's really been able to find it. They have an idea who the Pharaoh was, but they're not sure. On the other hand, does the Bible give the name of these two women, these midwives? And the answer is yes. Shiphrah and Paul. Two little people. These two midwives, we don't really know if they were Hebrew or Egyptian. I think they were probably Egyptian. Part of me thinks that. Why would Hebrew women be willing or be asked to kill Hebrew babies? On the other hand, why would they fear God more than Pharaoh? But given the direction from Pharaoh to kill all the male babies at birth, they had three options. To say yes, okay, and kill the babies. To say no, and deal with the anger and possible death from Pharaoh. Or say yes, but not follow through. This is the one that was chosen. Sometimes we are asked to do the right thing. They were asked, if we believe in God's intervention here, and I kind of think that's a great possibility. They were asked to do the right thing. Or as one person, I'm going to adapt this a little bit, one of my clients said to me years ago, sometimes a man has to do what a man has to do. I'm going to adapt that. Sometimes a woman has to do what a woman has to do as well. Okay. Perhaps when Joseph was sold rather than killing, God maybe, or being killed, maybe God had an intervention in there. And I don't know if anybody else saw it, but Sight and Sound had Jonah on TV this week. Did you see that? You know, that's a 4-chapter, that's a powerful, powerful story. But read Jonah, and you'll find out it's quite interesting how God intervenes all the time. I say that these two women were defiant risk takers, women of great courage, and God worked through them. As so often happens with God, the transformation comes in unexpected ways, unexpected times, and to unsuspecting people, surprising people, even the least powerful. Sometimes we are just asked to do the right thing. We're just asked to do the right thing, even when it's uncomfortable and unpopular or scary, and we just don't want to. Like Jonah. He was running away the whole time. Tracy Blackman is the Associate General Minister of Justice and Witness Ministry of the United Church of Christ. And several years ago, I had the great opportunity, it's when she first became the Associate Minister, to pick her up at the Philadelphia airport, take her to her hotel, and then to the spring meeting in Westchester. We had quite a conversation about doing the right thing, about being courageous, and at the same time, wanting to run away. And also the power of the little people, the people that have no power. Speaking of courage, who are we? Where are we in our own lives and in the life of Salem Pencils? Are we a defiant, courageous risk-taker group? Or are we more comfortable? Is God calling us to do gigantic things like Moses? All the small acts that are sometimes uncomfortable. Sometimes those small acts that are uncomfortable are part of the deal. It doesn't have to be big like Moses taking the people through the Red Sea. But sometimes little things. Sometimes little acts of kindness, a bit of respect for other people, understanding their shortcomings and their problems. They're little things. Sometimes they're uncomfortable. For some people, it's uncomfortable saying to someone they don't know. It's more uncomfortable saying to a person at the mall, saying hello to someone who may be black. That's more uncomfortable. But they're the little things that's the right thing to do. During the convention, I watched the Republican convention this week. There was a 13-year-old boy. Anybody see the 13-year-old boy? Anybody watch the convention? Okay. Most of it was, convention stuff. But the 13-year-old boy was great. Did anybody read about the 13-year-old boy? Okay, 13-year-old boy met Biden on the line somewhere earlier this year or something or other, on the reception line or something or other. And I don't know how it happened, but Biden found out that this 13-year-old kid could barely speak because of his stuttering. He feared so much. He was ridiculed in school and so forth. Afterwards, he took him back and he taught this kid the techniques that he used as a stutterer. I never knew that. As a stutterer, reading certain poetry and so forth, practicing over it. He was one of the speakers at the convention, this 13-year-old kid, stuttering and all. Here he is. And I just read the other day, I don't know if God's involved with this or not, He, at 13, this has been such a powerful thing for him. He is going to start a program, I guess with his parents and other people, to help other people who stutter. I think that's pretty amazing for a 13-year-old kid. Sometimes they don't have to be big things. Those midwives were incredibly courageous. They risked their lives. Where do we stand? Are we living hidden lives, waiting for God to pluck us up? Are we able to be defiant risk takers in spite of our fears? Are we able to allow God to work through us? Will we allow God to transform this church, Salem Hetzel, and us? Do we need to do something really big, or can we involve ourselves in the act of kindness, respect, acknowledgement of others? Or, and part of doing this is, I'm not sure Moses is sort of like me when I said to Hirschberger, first thing out of my mouth is, why me? Why me? I didn't want to, I felt really on the spot. I'm sure Jonah felt that way, and other people, Moses felt that way too. Why me? Why am I doing this? So going back, I like worship here, masks and all. Times they are a-changing. They are. The ministers at the ministerial meeting that want the German Reformed liturgy to stay forever don't realize that we cannot remain frozen in time. Things change in society and in the church. What is our future here at Salem Hetzel? Are we up for the challenge? Are we able to change? Can we be transformed? Or do we remain the same because, you know what I'm going to say? Well, we've always done it that way. I've heard that so many times from different churches. Okay, I haven't heard it here yet. I haven't been here enough, I guess. Does it come out here sometimes? We've always done it that way? Yeah. We might have to come up with a new brew. We have to come up with a new way of doing it, and yet keep the same gauge on the tracks, the same gauge that we follow what's there, and what's there is the good news of forgiveness and grace for all people, not just this group or that group. That's what Jonah did. The real message there is he went to people he hated. They weren't Jews at all. They were heathens. And yet he went to them. The message that all are welcome under God's umbrella. Are we part of this quiet brigade of hidden people like Shipra and Pia, who God will work through, giving us the courage to follow his will? And are we trusting and willing to be transformed? I don't know if anybody's on LinkedIn. If you are, there's a person that puts a message on there every day. Reverend Dr. Stephen Onsman, who's the pastor at Calvary in Reading. He has a message there, a little article every day. And Friday's article was entitled, Darkness and Light. Darkness and Light. And it boils down to, are we willing to work together to find our way out of the wilderness and into the light? That's the theme. Are we willing to be transformed and be an instrument of God to make this place, this world, better for all people?